The fake warrant crackled in Carlisle Merrick's hand as his gold tooth flashed in the December sun. And Alma Crawford knew she had maybe 3 minutes before he called the sheriff to arrest her for crimes she never committed. Juniper Springs, Arizona Territory, 1861. And the drought had turned neighbors into wolves fighting over the last well water. But Merrick's scheme was worse than thirst. It was theft dressed up as law. Alma backed toward the stagecoach office where she kept the books, her inheritance deed hidden in the false bottom of her desk drawer. And Wiley Brennan stepped between her and Merrick, with the calm of a man who'd faced Confederate cavalry and lived.
"Ma'am, you might want to step inside."
His voice was dry as the cracked earth, patient as winter waiting for rain. And Alma hated that her heart kicked faster when he called her ma'am like she was respectable, instead of a woman running from her own name.
"He has a warrant with my signature forged on it."
She kept her voice low and sharp.
"If he serves it, I lose everything before I can prove it's fake."
"Then, we don't let him serve it."
Wiley's hand stayed loose near his gun, and Merrick's smile widened, that gold tooth catching light like a promise of pain. Merrick stepped closer, his voice dripping false piety. The midwife's rival had spread rumors for months, but this was his masterpiece, a warrant so clean it looked legal, and the sheriff was his brother by marriage.
"We run."
Alma grabbed Wiley's sleeve and pulled him toward the alley between the stagecoach office and the dry goods store.
"Now."
They bolted as Merrick shouted for the deputy, boots pounding dirt, and Alma's skirt caught on a nail sticking out of a crate, ripping fabric and nearly tripping her. Wiley caught her elbow without breaking stride and yanked her forward into the narrow gap between buildings.
"Where's the deed?"
"My desk. False bottom. Third drawer."
They pressed against the sun-baked wood as boots thundered past the alley mouth, and Alma's breath came fast. Her shoulder jammed against Wiley's chest, his hand still gripping her arm like he thought she might vanish.
"You smell like ink and lavender."
"You smell like saddle leather and terrible timing."
His mouth twitched, almost a smile, and she wanted to slap him and kiss him in equal measure, which made her angrier. They waited 10 seconds. Then Wiley peered around the corner and pulled her back onto the street, moving fast toward the stagecoach office's rear door. The back door was locked, and Alma cursed under her breath, while Wiley pulled a thin piece of metal from his coat and worked the lock with hands steadier than hers.
"Where did you learn that?"
"Union cavalry. We liberated a lot of Confederate supply sheds."
The lock clicked, and they slipped inside, closing the door behind them as voices echoed from the street. The office was dim and smelled like dust and old ledgers, and Alma crossed to her desk in 3 strides, yanking open the third drawer and feeling for the false bottom release. Her fingers found the catch, and the bottom panel lifted, revealing the deed to her family's ranch, signed and sealed, and a folded letter from her father that made her throat tight.
"Got it."
She tucked both into her bodice and turned to find Wiley watching the front window, his shoulders tense.
4 men outside. Merrick's talking to the sheriff.
"The sheriff's his brother by marriage."
"I know."
Wiley glanced at her, then at the back door, then at the ceiling, and Alma followed his gaze to the attic hatch.
"Can you climb?"
"Better than you."
She grabbed the desk chair and climbed onto it, pushing the hatch open and hauling herself up with arms stronger than most men expected from a bookkeeper. Wiley followed, moving fast and quiet, and pulled the hatch closed just as the front door banged open and boots stomped across the floor below. They lay flat on the dusty attic boards, barely breathing, and Alma's hand found Wiley's in the dark, squeezing once. His thumb stroked her knuckles, a tiny gesture that made her chest ache, and she hated how much she wanted to keep holding on. Below them, Merrick's voice rang out, all false concern. The bookkeeper's dangerous. Sheriff, a thief and a liar, and that deed she's hiding is forged. We need to search this place top to bottom. Alma's jaw clenched, and Wiley's hand tightened on hers, his breath warm against her ear.
When they check the attic, we go through the roof vent to the neighboring building.
That's the saloon.
You got a better idea?
She didn't, so when the boots started climbing toward the hatch, she and Wiley crawled fast toward the far end of the attic, where a vent opened onto the saloon's roof. Wiley kicked the vent cover loose, and they squeezed through onto sun-baked shingles, the heat slamming into them like a fist. They slid down to the saloon's back edge and dropped onto the covered porch, landing hard but together, and Alma's ankle rolled on a loose board. She bit back a yelp, and Wiley caught her waist, holding her upright until she got her balance.
You all right?
Fine. Keep moving.
They jumped from the porch to the alley and ran toward the livery stable at the edge of town, past the blacksmith's forge and the empty schoolhouse, and Alma's lungs burned from the dry heat and the fear. At the stable, Wiley saddled 2 horses with quick, practiced movements, while Alma kept watch at the door. And when hoofbeats thundered from the direction of the stagecoach office, they mounted and kicked their horses into a hard gallop out of town. The Arizona desert opened around them, red rock and dry brush and heat that shimmered like water. And Alma leaned low over her horse's neck, the deed pressed against her heart, and Wiley riding beside her like he'd been born to it.
Where are we going?
The old line shack near Copper Ridge. It's on my family's land, and Merrick can't touch it without proof.
He'll follow.
Let him try.
They rode hard for 20 minutes, the horses' hooves kicking up dust, and the land rose into rocky hills dotted with juniper and scrub oak. The line shack appeared like a mirage, a low stone structure with a sagging roof, and they dismounted fast, leading the horses into the shade of an overhang. Inside, the shack was dim and cool, empty except for an old stove and a wooden bench. And Alma leaned against the wall to catch her breath, while Wiley checked the window.
No one. Yet.
They'll come. Merrick wants this land sold before the bank auction next week, and I'm the only thing standing in his way.
Not the only thing.
Wiley turned to face her, his expression serious, and Alma's heart did that stupid kick again.
You don't owe me this. The debt you think you owe my father, he wouldn't want you risking your life.
Maybe I'm not doing it for him.
The air between them felt tight and hot, and Alma looked away before she said something reckless.
We need a plan. Merrick has the sheriff and half the town on his side, and that warrant makes me a criminal until we prove it's fake.
Then, we prove it.
How?
We get the original document he forged it from, or we get a witness to testify he made it.
No one in Juniper Springs will cross him.
Then we go to the territorial judge in Tucson.
That's 3 days' ride, and Merrick will have men watching every trail.
Not if we leave tonight and take the canyon route through the back country.
Alma wanted to argue, but he was right, and the way he said it, calm and sure, like he'd already mapped every mile in his head, made her feel less alone than she'd felt in months. She nodded and pulled the deed from her bodice, unfolding it on the bench, and Wiley leaned close to study the signatures.
This is legitimate. Your father's hand, the notary seal, everything.
I know. That's why Merrick wants it gone before anyone sees it. He's been telling people I forged it to steal the ranch from my stepbrother.
You have a stepbrother?
Half-brother. He died in a mine collapse 2 years ago, and my father left everything to me because my brother had no heirs. Merrick's been courting investors to buy the town out from under us, and my ranch is the Keystone property.
So he frames you, seizes the land, sells it before you can fight back.
Exactly.
Wiley's jaw tightened, and he folded the deed carefully, handing it back to her.
We leave at sunset, pack light, and bring water.
They spent the next hour resting and preparing, and Alma found a canteen and some dried meat in the shack's storage box, while Wiley checked the horses and scouted the approach. When he came back inside, his face was grim.
Riders coming. 4 of them, maybe 5.
How long?
10 minutes. Alma's mind raced, and she grabbed the canteen and the dried meat, shoving them into a saddlebag.
We can't outrun them in daylight. They'll track us straight to Tucson.
Then we don't run. We hide and wait for dark.
Where?
The wash behind the ridge. It's deep enough to hide the horses and us, if we're quiet.
They moved fast, leading the horses out the back and down into a dry wash carved into the red rock. The walls rising 10 feet on either side, and the bottom shaded and cool. They pressed against the rock face, holding the horses' reins tight, and Alma's heart hammered as hoofbeats approached the line shack above. Voices drifted down, Merrick's smooth and false, the deputy's rough and impatient, and Alma bit her lip to stay silent. Wiley's hand found hers again, his thumb tracing small circles on her wrist, and she wanted to laugh at how absurd it was to feel safe while hiding in a wash with armed men hunting them. The search lasted 5 minutes. Then the riders moved on, heading east toward the main trail, and Alma let out a shaky breath.
They'll circle back when they don't find us.
Then we move now, before they do.
They climbed out of the wash and mounted, riding west into the hills as the sun dropped lower, painting the rocks orange and gold. The canyon route Wiley mentioned was a narrow cut between 2 mesas, barely wide enough for the horses, and they rode single file with Alma in front and Wiley watching their back trail. The air cooled as the sun sank, and Alma's stomach growled, reminding her they hadn't eaten since morning.
There's a spring about 2 miles ahead. We can water the horses and rest.
How do you know this country so well?
I rode patrol here during the war, chased Apache raiders and Confederate sympathizers through every canyon and gully.
You miss it?
The war? No. The clarity. Sometimes. You always knew who the enemy was.
And now?
Now it's complicated.
He said it lightly, but Alma heard the weight underneath, and she wondered what he'd seen that made him sound so tired. They reached the spring as the sky turned purple, a small pool fed by a trickle from the rock, and they dismounted to let the horses drink. Alma knelt and splashed water on her face, the cold shocking and good, and when she stood, Wiley was watching her with an expression she couldn't read.
What?
Nothing. You just look different out here. Less like a bookkeeper, more like someone who belongs.
I've never belonged anywhere.
Maybe you just haven't found the right place yet.
The words hung between them, gentle and dangerous, and Alma's chest ached again. That stupid wanting she couldn't afford. She turned away and refilled the canteen, and Wiley moved closer, his hand brushing her shoulder.
Alma.
Don't.
Don't what?
Don't make this harder than it is.
It's already hard.
She turned to face him, and he was too close, his eyes shadowed and serious, and she could feel the heat of him, even in the cooling air.
If we don't make it to Tucson, if Merrick catches us, you could lose everything. Your reputation, your freedom, your life.
I've already lost plenty. I'll risk the rest.
His hand came up to cup her cheek, rough and warm, and Alma's breath hitched, her body leaning toward him before her brain caught up. The kiss was inevitable, slow and careful, like they both knew it might be the only one. And when they broke apart, Alma's hands were fisted in his coat, and her heart was pounding harder than it had all day.
We should keep moving.
Yes.
Neither of them moved for another 5 seconds. Then Wiley stepped back and cleared his throat, and Alma wanted to laugh at how ridiculous they both were. They mounted and rode deeper into the canyon as night fell, the stars blazing overhead and the air turning cold. An hour later, the canyon opened onto a wide plateau, and Wiley reined in sharply, his hand rising in a silent signal. Alma stopped beside him and followed his gaze to the valley below, where campfires dotted the darkness like fallen stars.
What is that?
Cattle camp. Roundup season.
Can we go around?
Not without adding 6 hours to the ride.
Then we go through.
It's risky. If Merrick's men are watching the camps, they'll spot us.
We don't have a choice.
They descended carefully, keeping to the shadows, and the smell of wood smoke and cattle rose to meet them. The camp was sprawling, dozens of cowboys and ranch hands working the herds for the season, and Alma kept her head down as they rode past the edge of the firelight. A dog barked, and a cowboy looked up, but Wiley tipped his hat in a friendly gesture, and they kept moving, and no one challenged them. They were almost clear of the camp when a shout rang out behind them, and Alma's stomach dropped.
Ride.
They kicked the horses into a gallop, dirt flying, and the shout turned into a chorus as riders mounted and gave chase. The plateau stretched ahead, open and exposed, and Alma's horse stumbled on loose rock, nearly throwing her. Wiley grabbed her reins and yanked her horse back on course, and they raced side by side toward the far edge where the land dropped into another canyon. Behind them, the riders were closing fast, and Alma counted at least 6, maybe more.
When we hit the canyon, stay close to me. Don't try to navigate it alone.
I know these canyons.
Not at night, you don't.
They plunged into the canyon mouth, the walls rising dark and close, and the sound of hoofbeats echoed like thunder. Wiley took the lead, navigating by memory and moonlight, and Alma followed so close their stirrups almost touched. The canyon twisted and split, and Wiley chose the left fork without hesitation, then the right at the next split, and Alma realized he was leading them in a pattern designed to lose pursuers. The hoofbeats behind them faded, then disappeared, and Wiley slowed to a trot, listening.
I think we lost them.
For now.
They rode another hour in silence, the canyon walls narrowing and then opening again into a small box canyon with a spring and a stand of cottonwood trees. Wiley dismounted and helped Alma down, and she swayed on her feet, exhausted and shaky from adrenaline.
We'll camp here. It's defensible and hidden.
What if they find us?
Then we fight.
He said it simply, like it was just another fact, and Alma wanted to argue, but she was too tired. They unsaddled the horses and made a cold camp, no fire to give away their position, and ate dried meat and stale biscuits from the saddlebags. Alma sat with her back against a rock, the deed still tucked against her heart, and Wiley settled beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched.
Tell me about the debt. The one you think you owe my father.
He saved my life. Confederate ambush near the Gila River, 1862. I was pinned down with 2 other men, and your father rode through enemy fire to pull us out. One of the other men died anyway, but I made it because of him.
He never mentioned it.
He wouldn't. He was that kind of man.
He would have liked knowing you kept your word.
I'm not done keeping it yet.
Alma turned to look at him, and in the moonlight his face was all hard angles and shadows, but his eyes were soft.
Why does it matter so much?
Because promises are all we have out here. Break them, and you're nothing.
She nodded, understanding more than she wanted to, and leaned her head against his shoulder, too tired to care about propriety. His arm came around her, careful and warm, and they sat like that until the stars wheeled overhead, and exhaustion pulled them under. Alma woke to pre-dawn gray and the sound of distant hoofbeats, and she jerked upright, her hand going to Wiley's arm. He was already awake, his face tense, and he pressed a finger to his lips.
They're close. Maybe half a mile out.
How many?
Hard to say. At least 4.
They saddled the horses in silence, working fast, and rode out of the box canyon before the sun cleared the horizon. The trail ahead was rough and steep, climbing toward a high ridge, and Alma's horse labored under her weight, breath coming hard. At the top of the ridge, they paused to look back, and Alma's stomach sank. 6 riders were visible on the plateau below, moving fast and purposeful, and at the front rode Merrick on a gray horse, his gold tooth flashing even at this distance.
He's relentless.
Desperate. If we reach Tucson and file that deed with the judge, his whole scheme collapses.
Then, we don't stop.
They rode down the far side of the ridge, the trail so steep Alma had to lean back in the saddle to keep from pitching forward, and at the bottom they hit a wide-open stretch of desert. No cover, no shelter. Just red dirt and sagebrush, under a blazing sun. Halfway across, Alma heard the thunder and looked over her shoulder to see a wall of dust rising from the east, and her heart stopped.
What is that?
Stampede.
The word was barely out of his mouth when the herd appeared. Hundreds of cattle running blind and panicked, and behind them rode cowboys trying desperately to turn the herd before it hit the town. Juniper Springs lay 2 miles ahead, small and fragile, and the cattle were aimed straight at it.
If they hit the town, people will die.
We have to turn them.
That's suicide.
So is letting them run.
Alma kicked her horse toward the herd without waiting for an answer, and Wiley cursed and followed, riding hard to catch her. They angled toward the front of the stampede, racing parallel to the charging cattle, and Alma's mind went blank except for the pounding hooves and the dust and the impossible task ahead. Wiley pulled even with her and shouted over the noise.
We split up. You take the left flank. I'll take the right. Turn the leaders and the rest will follow.
What if they don't?
Then we die trying. They split and Alma rode like her life depended on it, because it did, waving her arms and shouting to turn the led cattle. The animals were wild-eyed and foam-flecked, too panicked to think, but she pushed her horse closer, forcing the leaders to veer left. On the far side of the herd, Wiley was doing the same, his voice carrying over the noise, and slowly, agonizingly, the herd began to curve away from the town. Alma's horse stumbled, and she grabbed the saddle horn to stay on, her heart in her throat, And then the herd was turning, sweeping wide in a great arc that carried them past Juniper Springs and out into the open desert. The stampede slowed and stopped, the cattle milling confused and exhausted, and Alma reined in her horse, gasping for air and shaking all over. Wiley rode over to her, his face grim and dust-caked, and grabbed her reins to steady her horse. "You all right?"
I think so.
That was the stupidest, bravest thing I've ever seen.
You did the same.
I'm a fool.
He said it like it was a compliment, and Alma laughed, the sound half hysterical, and Wiley's mouth quirked into a grin. They sat there for a moment, catching their breath, and then one of the cowboys rode over, tipping his hat in thanks. The cowboy looked young and shaken, and he gestured toward the town. The town's safe, because of you two. Anything we can do to repay you, you name it.
Actually, there is.
Alma dismounted, her legs wobbling, and pulled the deed from her bodice.
We need witnesses. Men who will testify in Tucson that Carlisle Merrick forged a warrant to steal my land.
The cowboy's face darkened, and he nodded. Half the camp knows Merrick's a snake. We'll ride with you to Tucson and swear to it. 2 more cowboys joined them, their faces set, and Alma felt hope flare for the first time in days. Wiley dismounted and stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her back, and she leaned into the touch, exhausted and grateful. They rested briefly, watering the horses and washing some of the dust from their faces. And when they mounted again, they had an escort of 5 cowboys, all armed and angry. The ride to Tucson took 2 more days. Hard and hot. And Merrick's men tried to intercept them twice. But the cowboys fought them off with rifle fire and grim determination. On the 3rd morning, they rode into Tucson, a sprawling desert town with adobe buildings and wide dusty streets, and made their way straight to the territorial courthouse. The judge was a stern man with silver hair and sharp eyes, and he listened to Alma's story, examined the deed, and heard the cowboys' testimony about Merrick's schemes and false arrests. By noon, he'd issued a writ of seizure against Merrick's assets and sent a marshal to Juniper Springs to arrest him. Alma stood on the courthouse steps, the deed safe in her hands again, and felt the weight of months lift from her shoulders. Wiley leaned against the railing beside her, his hat pushed back, and she turned to look at him.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I mean it. I wouldn't have made it without you.
You would have. You're tougher than you think.
Maybe. But I'm glad I didn't have to find out.
He smiled, small and real, and Alma's heart did that stupid kick again. Only this time she didn't mind.
What happens now?
I go home. Rebuild the ranch. Try to make it something my father would be proud of.
Need help?
Are you offering?
Depends. You hiring?
I don't have much money.
I don't need much.
The air between them felt lighter, full of possibility, and Alma stepped closer, her hand finding his.
I could use a foreman. Someone who knows cattle and can handle trouble.
I know a little about both.
Good. Because I'm planning to expand the herd, and I'll need someone I trust.
Trust's a big word.
It is. But I do. I trust you.
Wiley's grip tightened on her hand, and he leaned in, his voice low.
Then I guess I'm your foreman.
They kissed there on the courthouse steps, quick and soft, and Alma felt the world narrow to just the 2 of them. Dust and heat and the promise of something real. When they pulled apart, She was smiling, and so was he. They stayed in Tucson for 3 more days, waiting for the marshal to confirm Merrick's arrest. And when the telegram came through, Alma felt the last knot in her chest loosen. Merrick was in custody, his assets frozen, and the fake warrant was voided. The ranch was hers, free and clear. They rode back to Juniper Springs at an easy pace, the cowboys splitting off one by one to return to their herds. And by the time they reached the edge of town, it was just Alma and Wiley again. The town looked different now, quieter and smaller. And Alma felt no fear as they rode down the main street. The sheriff nodded to them from the boardwalk, his face tight with embarrassment, and several townsfolk called out greetings. Word had spread fast about Merrick's arrest, and Alma could see the shift in how people looked at her, respect replacing pity. They rode out to the ranch in late afternoon, the sun low and golden, and Alma dismounted in front of the house her father had built. It was dusty and wind-worn, but it was hers, and she felt a surge of pride as she walked up the porch steps. Wiley followed, leading both horses to the trough, and when he returned, he stood at the bottom of the steps, looking up at her.
Nice place.
It will be. Once we fix the roof and clear the corral and get the herd back up.
Sounds like a lot of work.
It is. You sure you're up for it?
I'm sure.
Alma smiled and reached out her hand, and Wiley climbed the steps and took it. They stood there together, looking out over the land, the desert stretching away in every direction, wild and beautiful.
I'm glad you're here.
Me too.
The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and Alma leaned against Wiley's shoulder, feeling the warmth of him and the steady beat of his heart. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe. They spent the evening cleaning the house, sweeping out dust and checking the water barrels, and by the time the stars came out, they were sitting on the porch, tired and content. Wiley had built a small fire in the yard, and the flames flickered in the darkness, casting soft light across the dirt.
What made you come back? To the west, I mean. After the war.
Didn't have anywhere else to go. The cavalry was done. My family was gone. And I figured I might as well ride until I found something worth staying for.
Did you find it?
I think I did.
Alma's breath caught, and she turned to look at him, his face shadowed and serious.
You mean that?
I do.
She kissed him then, slow and deep, and Wiley's arms came around her, holding her close. When they finally pulled apart, Alma was breathless, her heart pounding, and she rested her forehead against his.
Stay. Not just for the ranch. For me.
I'm not going anywhere.
They sat together on the porch as the fire burned low, talking about plans for the herd and the house, and the future they were going to build. Alma felt lighter than she had in months, the weight of fear and anger finally gone, and when Wiley took her hand again, she held on tight. The night was warm and still, the stars thick overhead, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Alma didn't flinch. She was home, and she wasn't alone. And for the first time since her father died, she felt like everything was going to be all right. The next morning, they woke early and started work on the ranch, mending fences and clearing brush. And by midday, Alma was sweating and sore, but smiling. Wiley worked beside her, steady and strong, and every time she looked up, he was there, watching her with that quiet smile that made her pulse skip. They broke for lunch in the shade of the house, sharing water and dried beef, and Alma leaned back against the wall, exhausted and happy.
This is good.
It is.
I mean it. I forgot what it felt like to have someone on my side.
You've got me now. For as long as you want.
Forever then.
Forever works.
Alma laughed and kissed him again, quick and light, and Wiley grinned against her mouth. They spent the rest of the afternoon working, and by evening, the corral was cleared, and the roof patched, and Alma stood in the yard looking at the progress they'd made. It wasn't much, but it was a start, and for the first time, she could see the ranch the way it used to be, the way it could be again. Wiley came up beside her, his hand finding hers, and they stood there together, watching the sun set over the desert.
Thank you.
For what?
For staying. For believing me. For everything.
You don't have to thank me.
I know. But I want to.
Wiley squeezed her hand and pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders, and Alma leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his body and the steady beat of his heart. The sky was burning red and gold, the air cooling, and somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried. Alma closed her eyes and breathed deep, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt almost too good to be real. Alma woke before dawn every day, pulling on her work clothes and tying her hair back, and by the time she stepped outside, Wiley was already in the corral, working with the horses or checking the water troughs. They worked side by side from sunrise to sunset, mending fences, clearing brush, and slowly bringing the ranch back to life. The heat was relentless, the sun beating down like a hammer, but Alma didn't mind. She was too busy to notice, too focused on the work and the future they were building together. One afternoon, they rode out to check the northern boundary line, where the old fence had collapsed years ago. The ride took them through a narrow canyon, the walls rising steep and red on either side, and the heat was trapped between the rocks, making the air shimmer and dance. Alma wiped sweat from her forehead and squinted up at the sky, wishing for clouds. Wiley rode beside her, his hat pulled low, and when they reached the boundary, they dismounted and surveyed the damage. The fence was a mess, posts rotted and wire tangled, and Alma sighed.
This is going to take days.
Maybe. But we've got time.
Do we? Because it feels like the clock's always ticking.
That's because you're always racing it. Slow down. We'll get it done.
Alma turned to argue, but the look on his face stopped her. He was smiling, small and easy, and she felt her own mouth twitch in response.
You make it sound simple.
It is simple. Work hard. Rest when you can. And don't waste time worrying about things you can't change.
I'm not good at that.
I know. But you're learning.
He stepped closer and brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering against her cheek, and Alma's breath caught. The canyon was silent except for the horses shifting behind them, and the air felt thick and charged. Wiley's hand slid to her jaw, tilting her face up, and Alma closed her eyes, leaning into the touch.
You're doing fine, Alma. Better than fine.
I don't always feel that way.
I know. But I do. And I'm not leaving. So you're stuck with me.
Good.
She kissed him then, slow and deliberate, and Wiley's arms came around her, pulling her close. The world narrowed to just the two of them, the heat and the silence, and the steady beat of his heart against hers. When they finally pulled apart, Alma was breathless, her pulse racing, and she rested her forehead against his chest.
We should get back to work,
Probably.
but I don't want to.
Me neither.
They stood there for another moment, holding each other. And then Alma stepped back, her face flushed, and picked up her gloves. They worked through the afternoon, replacing posts and stringing new wire, and by the time the sun started to sink, they'd made real progress. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, both of them tired and dusty. And when they reached the house, Alma slid from her horse and groaned.
I'm too sore to move.
Then don't.
Wiley dismounted and came around to her side, his hands settling on her waist. And Alma leaned into him, grateful for the support.
You're going to spoil me.
That's the plan.
She laughed and let him help her to the porch. And they sat together in the fading light, watching the sky turn pink and gold. The air was cooling, the first hint of evening settling in, and Alma felt a rare sense of peace. A week later, word came from Tucson. The marshal had arrested Carlisle Merrick, and the territorial court had seized his assets pending trial. The news spread through Juniper Springs like wildfire, and by evening, half the town had ridden out to the ranch to congratulate Alma and hear the story. She stood in the yard, overwhelmed by the attention, and Wiley stayed close, his hand resting on her back. The cowboys from the cattle camp were there, grinning and clapping her on the shoulder, and the old woman who ran the general store brought a basket of bread and preserves. That woman told me you had grit, girl. I'm glad I was right. Alma thanked her, her throat tight, and when the crowd finally dispersed, she sat on the porch steps, exhausted and emotional. Wiley sat beside her, his shoulder pressed against hers, and she leaned into him.
I didn't think it would feel like this.
Like what?
Like I finally belong somewhere.
You do. This is your home.
Our home.
Yeah. Our home.
Alma turned to look at him, her heart full, and Wiley smiled, small and sure. The stars were coming out overhead, thick and bright, and the air was warm and still. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, and closer, the horses shuffled in the corral. Alma reached for Wiley's hand and held on tight.
I love you.
I love you too.
They sat there for a long time, just holding each other, and when they finally went inside, Alma felt lighter than she had in years. The future was still uncertain, the work still hard, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She had Wiley, and she had the ranch, and that was enough. The following month brought new challenges. A drought settled over the territory, the wells running low, and Alma had to negotiate with neighboring ranchers to share water rights. It was tense, the meetings long and heated, but Wiley was always there, calm and steady, backing her up when tempers flared. They struck deals, made compromises, and by the end of the month, the ranch had enough water to keep the herd alive. Alma was proud of the work they'd done, proud of the respect she was earning, and when she looked at Wiley, she saw the same pride reflected in his eyes.
You're good at this.
At what?
Leading. People listen to you.
Only because you're standing behind me.
No. They listen because you're smart and fair, and you don't back down.
I learned from the best.
Your father?
And you.
Wiley's face softened, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her close. Alma closed her eyes and breathed him in, feeling safe and loved and exactly where she belonged. The work continued, hard and relentless, but they faced it together, and every challenge they overcame made them stronger. By mid-autumn, the ranch was thriving, the herd healthy and growing, and Alma could see the future taking shape. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set, Wiley turned to Alma, his expression serious.
I've been thinking
About what?
about us. About the future.
And?
I want to marry you.
Alma's breath caught, and she stared at him, her heart pounding.
Wiley,
I know it's fast, but I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I love you, Alma. I want to build this life with you, for real.
I want that too.
So is that a yes?
It's a yes.
Wiley grinned, wide and genuine, and pulled her into his arms, kissing her hard and deep. Alma kissed him back, her hands in his hair, and when they finally broke apart, she was laughing, tears streaming down her face.
When?
Whenever you want. Tomorrow. Next week. Next month. I don't care, as long as it happens.
Let's do it soon. I don't want to wait.
Me neither.
They spent the rest of the evening making plans, talking about the ceremony and who they'd invite and where they'd hold it. And by the time they went to bed, Alma felt like she was floating. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and smiled. Her father would have liked Wiley. He would have been proud of the ranch, proud of her, and that thought brought a fresh wave of tears. Wiley reached for her hand in the darkness, his fingers lacing through hers, and Alma held on tight.
Thank you.
For what?
For everything. For staying. For loving me.
You don't have to thank me for that.
Alma turned to face him, her eyes adjusting to the dim light, and Wiley smiled, small and tender.
I'm the lucky one, Alma. Don't ever forget that.
She kissed him then, soft and slow, and they held each other until sleep finally came. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and preparation. Alma and Wiley rebuilt the corral fence, repaired the barn roof, and started gathering cattle from the neighboring ranches to rebuild the herd. The work was hard, and the days were long, but Alma had never been happier. Every morning she woke beside Wiley, and every night they sat together on the porch, watching the stars and talking about their plans. The wedding was set for early October, just after the roundup, and Alma spent her evenings stitching a simple white dress by lamplight while Wiley worked on building new furniture for the house. One afternoon, as they rode out to check the northern pasture, Wiley spotted movement on the ridge above them.
Riders.
How many?
3. Maybe 4.
Alma felt her stomach tighten, but Wiley's hand was already on his rifle. They dismounted and took cover behind a stand of rocks, watching as the riders drew closer. Alma recognized the lead horse immediately, a big black gelding with a white blaze, and her blood ran cold.
That's Merrick's horse.
I thought the marshal arrested him.
He must have gotten out. Or bought his way out.
Wiley cursed under his breath and levered a round into the rifle. The riders came closer, and Alma could see Merrick's face now, his gold tooth glinting as he smiled. He had 2 men with him, both armed, and they spread out as they approached, clearly looking for trouble. Wiley fired a warning shot into the air, and the riders pulled up short.
That's far enough. Merrick.
Merrick laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. The man shouted back that the judge had dismissed the charges for lack of evidence, that he'd paid off the right people, and now he'd come to finish what he started. Alma felt rage boil up in her chest, hot and fierce, and she grabbed Wiley's arm.
We can't let him get away with this.
We won't.
Wiley fired again, this time aiming for the ground near Merrick's horse, and the animal reared, nearly throwing him. Merrick's men returned fire, and bullets cracked against the rocks around them. Alma pulled her own rifle and fired back, her shots deliberate and steady. And one of Merrick's men yelped and fell from his saddle, clutching his shoulder. The gunfight lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours. Wiley took down the second man with a clean shot to the leg, and Merrick, seeing himself outnumbered and outgunned, turned his horse and fled. Alma wanted to chase him, to end this once and for all, but Wiley grabbed her arm and pulled her back.
Let him go.
He'll just come back.
Not if we make sure he can't.
They rode hard for Juniper Springs, pushing their horses to the limit, and arrived just as the sun was setting. Wiley went straight to the telegraph office and sent a wire to the territorial governor, detailing Merrick's crimes and his escape from justice. Alma went to the sheriff, a grizzled old man named Dutch who'd known her father, and told him everything. Dutch listened, his face growing darker with every word, and when she finished, he stood and reached for his shotgun. The sheriff gathered a posse of 6 men, all neighbors who'd been wronged by Merrick over the years, and they rode out at dawn to track him down. Alma and Wiley rode with them, their rifles loaded and ready, and by midday they'd found Merrick's camp in a narrow canyon 10 miles south of town. The posse surrounded the camp, and Dutch called out for Merrick to surrender. Merrick came out with his hands raised, his gold tooth hidden behind a tight-lipped scowl, and Dutch arrested him on the spot. This time there would be no bribes, no bought judges. The governor's office sent a federal marshal to escort Merrick to Tucson, and he was tried and convicted within the month. Alma stood in the courtroom and watched as the judge sentenced him to 10 years in Yuma Territorial Prison. And when the gavel fell, she felt the last piece of her father's legacy finally fall into place. They rode back to Juniper Springs the next morning, taking their time, and arrived 3 days later to find the ranch bustling with activity. The neighbors had heard about Merrick's arrest and had come to help with the roundup. And when Alma rode into the yard, she was greeted by 24 men and women, all smiling and offering congratulations. She dismounted, her throat tight with emotion, and thanked each of them in turn. Wiley stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder, and together they watched as the neighbors worked to repair fences and clear brush and move cattle into the holding pens. By evening, the work was done, and Alma stood in the yard, looking at her ranch, truly hers now, and felt a surge of pride and gratitude.
I couldn't have done this without all of you.
The neighbors smiled and waved off her thanks, and one by one, they rode away, leaving Alma and Wiley alone in the fading light. Alma turned to Wiley, her eyes shining, and he pulled her close, his arms tight around her.
You did it.
We did it.
Fair enough.
They kissed, slow and deep, and Alma felt the last weight lift from her shoulders. The ranch was safe, Merrick was gone, and she had Wiley by her side. Everything else would follow. The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the small church in Juniper Springs. Alma wore a simple white dress borrowed from a neighbor, and Wiley wore his best shirt and a new tie that made him look uncomfortable, but handsome. Dutch gave Alma away, and the ceremony was short and sweet, attended by every neighbor and rancher within 20 miles. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Wiley kissed her like they were the only two people in the world, and Alma kissed him back, her heart full to bursting. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard, and food brought by every family in attendance. There was music and dancing and laughter, and Alma felt happier than she'd ever been in her life. Wiley danced with her under the stars, his hand firm on her waist, and when the last guest finally left, they stood together on the porch, watching the moon rise over the desert.
How does it feel to be Mrs. Brennan?
Perfect. How does it feel to be Mr. Crawford?
Wait, I thought you were Mrs. Brennan.
I am. But you're working my land now, so technically you're Mr. Crawford.
Is that how it works?
That's how I say it works.
Wiley laughed and pulled her close, kissing her forehead, and Alma wrapped her arms around him, breathing in the scent of dust and sweat and home.
I love you, Alma.
I love you too.
They went inside, leaving the empty yard behind, and closed the door on the rest of the world. The next morning, they woke early and started work on the ranch together, side by side, the way they would for the rest of their lives. The cattle were in good shape, the fences were mended, and the water was flowing steady from the well. Alma stood in the yard, watching Wiley work with one of the new calves, and felt a rush of gratitude for everything they'd built together. He looked up and caught her watching, and grinned, that easy smile that still made her heart skip.
What are you staring at?
You.
Why?
Because I can. Because you're mine.
Fair point.
He walked over to her, brushing dust from his hands, and pulled her close.
I was thinking
About what?
about how lucky I am. I came here to pay a debt, and I ended up with everything I never knew I wanted.
Me too.
They stood there together, the morning sun warming their faces, and Alma felt a peace settle over her that she'd never felt before. The ranch was theirs, the future was theirs, and they had each other. That was all that mattered. Wiley kissed her, soft and slow, and Alma kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into that single moment. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed, and she held him close.
Promise me something.
Anything.
Promise me we'll always be a team. No matter what comes.
I promise. Always.
Alma smiled, her eyes bright with tears, and Wiley wiped them away with his thumb, gentle and careful. They walked back to the house together, hand in hand, and sat on the porch as the sun climbed higher, drinking coffee and watching the world wake up around them. The cattle grazed peacefully in the pasture. The sky was clear and blue, and somewhere in the distance, a bird sang. Alma leaned her head on Wiley's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, holding her close.
This is perfect.
It is.
I love you. Wiley Brennan.
I love you too, Alma Brennan.
And there, on the porch at sunrise, with the desert stretching out before them and the rest of their lives waiting to be lived, they sat together in the quiet morning light, finally home.